Session 846. It's over. The crisis at 3 Mile Island has passed, or so the governor of Pennsylvania announced on television this morning. That is, the threat of an immediate catastrophe from a meltdown in the plant's Unit Number 2 nuclear reactor has evidently passed. Engineers have dissipated the hydrogen bubble in the reactor's core, but the core temperature is still considerably above normal, and children and pregnant women are still advised to stay out of the area. The challenges and fears created at 3 Mile Island will last for years, however. Jane and I read that it will take up to 4 years and many millions of dollars to decontaminate, overhaul, and place the crippled reactor back in operation. The cost is given in incalculable estimates, ranging from $40 million to $400 million. Some government officials say that the reactor may never see service again, that it may end up junked, or as a sealed mausoleum, a mute symbol of our nuclear age. Nor do we know what fate awaits the plant's undamaged Unit Number 1. A current fear is that if and when cleanup operations are begun, the small and supposedly harmless amounts of radiation still seeping into the atmosphere may intensify. There's much debate already about the cancer deaths that may show up in the local populace, since no one really knows just yet what a safe dose of radiation could be in such a situation. And above all, our energy experts maintain that the United States has traveled too far along the nuclear path to turn back now. I interject this, and we haven't learned anything from that because now we still have nuclear power plant problems. Regardless of whether the event at 3 Mile Island have resulted in any significant radioactive fallout so far, they have generated some disquieting fallout as far as Jane and I are personally concerned. I'll describe the latest of the many courses of action we've found ourselves considering over the years as we work with the Seth material, while trying to keep a balance between the realities we've created for ourselves and the possibilities we constantly encounter in the outside world. Jane was quite upset before the session this evening, and I'm the one who was responsible for her state. Somehow, after supper, we got on the subject of Seth doing a quick book about Jonestown and 3 Mile Island, something that could be offered to the public very soon, instead of material that would show up in a regular Seth book a couple of years from now. We already had the perfect title for the book, one we jokingly originated following last Monday night's session: Seth on Jonestown and 3 Mile Island, Religious and Scientific Cults. I didn't get carried away by the idea this evening, but I was certainly taken with it as we talked. Yet I could see that I confused Jane, for to make such a venture possible, we'd have to change certain beliefs and values that are deeply rooted within us, especially those about personal privacy and our reluctance to go public with such topical, immediate material, instead of trusting that the Seth material will exert a meaningful influence in society over the long run. Also involved would be the instant criticisms we'd encounter. But I think the main portion of my enthusiasm stemmed from the frustration I often feel because much of Seth's material will go unpublished at this time. This year alone, for instance, he's already given a good amount of excellent information upon a number of non-book topics, among them the interpretation of dreams, human, annual, and dual consciousness, and the interactions among them, human sexuality, viruses and inoculations, other realities he himself inhabits, and so forth. We're sorry to think that such material will be shelved indefinitely, but there's no room for most of it in mass events, and there's probably won't be in future books either. I do try to give hints and clues to some of it in this book, though, as I've done recently. At the same time, I told Jane tonight I wasn't asking that she try for a fast book because I didn't think she was ready for it, even though I knew that she and Seth could do it. "I wish I had your confidence in me," she remarked at one point. "What would happen to mass events in the meantime?" "Nothing," I said. "It would just wait until the Jonestown 3 Mile Island thing was done. Maybe we'd have sessions almost every night for a few weeks or whatever it took. Anyhow, we'd have to check to see whether our publisher is set up to market a book that quickly, or would even want to." I sought to reassure her, but later when I went into her study to ask about something else, I found her looking quite distressed as she sat at her typewriter. My words had had more of an impact than I'd intended. I apologized, but Jane had written some chapter headings which were very good, and half a page of commentary for Seth's hypothetical book. Once again, I insisted that I wasn't suggesting she try for the project. Jane believed me finally, and in the course of the conversation, I learned that she's also been worrying about which of Seth's recent sessions should be presented in mass events. She agreed with the decisions I'd made in that area, but she also wanted Seth to get back to the book per se and call his sessions dictation. Well, she finally said after we'd sat for the session, "I guess I'm about ready." Then Seth came through without his customary greetings. "One remark, as far as your participation is now in our books, it might be better, Joseph, as Seth calls me, if you do not think in terms of notes so much, but in terms of your writing contribution. Do you follow me?" "Yes." "The change in attitude could be quite helpful to you in many ways. It should be obvious to you that your own characteristics, interests, attributes, and directions also are partially responsible for the form the material takes. The Jonestown and Harrisburg incidents are indeed classic examples of the meeting places between private and public realities. I intend to deal with them in depth in The Individual and the Nature of Mass Events, where the background, particularly for Frameworks 1 and 2, have already been established. I am quite willing to hold more sessions a week, and Rupert, Jane, is very capable, particularly in rhythms. Do you follow me?" Yes, Jane had also told me tonight that she had particularly enjoyed last Sunday's unscheduled session, both the time of week it had been held and the time of day. She had felt free of worry or concern about what she had talked about, as well as from other usual routine. Now, dictation. This is still part of Chapter 6. The Jonestown disaster happened long after we began this book. Just lately another event occurred, a breakdown and near disaster at a nuclear plant near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Now, in my other books, I have rarely commented upon public events of any nature. This manuscript, however, is devoted to the interplay that occurs between an individual and mass experience, and so we must deal with your national dreams and fears and their materializations in private and public life. In scientific terms, there was no fallout involved in the disaster at Jonestown. Yet, there was, of course, a psychological fallout and effects that will be felt throughout the land by people in all walks of life. The Jonestown situation definitely involved all of the characteristics that I have described as belonging to a cult. There was fanaticism, a closed mental environment, the rousing of hopes toward an ideal that seemed unachievable because of the concentration upon all of the barriers that seemed to stand in the way. Most cults have their own specialized language of one kind or another, particular phrases used repetitiously, and that special language further serves to divorce the devotees from the rest of the world. This practice was also followed by those at Jonestown. Loyalty to friends and family was discouraged, and so those in Jonestown had left strong bonds of intimacy behind. They felt threatened by the world, which was painted by their beliefs so that it presented a picture of unmitigated evil and corruption. All of this should be fairly well recognized by now. The situation led to the deaths of hundreds. The Harrisburg situation potentially threatened the lives of many thousands, and in that circle of events, the characteristics of cult are less easy to discern. Yet they are present. You have scientific cults as well as religious ones. Religion and science both loudly proclaim their search for truth, although they are seemingly involved in completely opposing systems. They both treat their beliefs as truths, with which no one should tamper. They search for beginnings and endings. The scientists have their own vocabulary, which is used to reinforce the exclusive nature of science. Now I am speaking of the body of science in general terms here, for there is in a way a body of science that exists as a result of each individual scientist's participation. A given scientist may act quite differently in his family life and as a scientist. He may love his family dog, for example, while at the same time think nothing of injecting other animals with diseased tissues in his professional capacity. Granting that, however, cults interact, and so there is quite a relationship between the state of religion when it operates as a cult and the state of science when it operates as a cult. Right now, your cultish religions exist in response to the cultish behavior of science. Science insists it does not deal with values, but leaves those to philosophers. In stating that the universe is an accidental creation, however, a meaningless chance conglomeration formed by an unfeeling cosmos, it states quite clearly its belief that the universe and man's existence has no value. All that remains is what pleasure or accomplishment can somehow be wrested from man's individual biological processes. A recent article in a national magazine speaks glowingly about the latest direction and progress in the field of psychology, saying that man will realize that his moods, thoughts, and feelings are the result of the medley of chemicals that swirl in his brain. That statement devalues man's subjective world. The scientists claim a great idealism. They claim to have the way toward truth. Their truth is to be found by studying the objective world, the world of objects, including animals and stars, galaxy, and mice, but by viewing these objects as if they are themselves without intrinsic value, as if their existences have no meaning. Now, those beliefs separate man from his own nature. He cannot trust himself, or who can really rely upon the accidental bubbling of hormones and chemicals that somehow form a stew called consciousness? An unsavory brew at best. So the field of science will forever escape opening up into any great vision of the meaning of life. It cannot value life, and so in its search for the ideal, it can indeed justify in its philosophy the possibility of an accident that might kill many, many people through direct or indirect means, and kill the unborn as well. The possibility is indeed written in the scientific program. There are plans, though faulty ones, of procedures to be taken in case of accident. So in your world, that probability exists, and it is not secret. As a group of this scientists rigorously oppose the existence of telepathy or clairvoyance, or of any philosophy that brings these into focus. Only lately have some begun to think in terms of mind affecting matter, and even such a possibility disturbs them profoundly because it shatters the foundations of their philosophical stance. The scientists have long stood on the side of intelligence and reason, logical thought and objectivity. They are trained to be unemotional, to stand apart from their experience, to separate themselves from nature, and to view any emotional characteristics of their own with an ironical eye. Again, they have stated that they are neutral to the world of values. They became, until recently, the new priest. All problems, it seemed, could be solved scientifically. This applies to every avenue of life, to health matters, social disorders, economics, even to war and peace. How did such scientific gentlemen, with all of their precise paraphernalia, with all of their objective and reasonable viewpoints, end up with a nuclear plant that ran askew, that threatened present and future life? And what about the people who live nearby? Give us a moment. End of chapter. Okay, chapter 7. We're beginning another chapter. The good, the bad, and the catastrophic. Jonestown, Harrisburg, and when is an idealist a fanatic? All that is the heading of this chapter 7. Give us a moment. Long pause. That is the end of dictation. Jane had said before the 846th session that she held a week ago that she wanted Seth to get back to book dictation, and Seth had obligingly given the heading for chapter 7 at the end of the session. Yet in Monday night's deleted 847th session, that energy personality essence, as he calls himself, digressed once again from work on mass events to give us more excellent material on plant and animal consciousness. He also discussed such divergent topics as a wide variety of responses that his material generates in correspondence. And not all of those reactions are so favorable, I might add. We were very busy with publishing affairs over the weekend on Friday, April the 6th. We received from the production department at Prentice Hall the printer's page proofs. We spent all of our waking hours checking everything. I'll just kind of get through this. Good evening. Good evening, Seth. Dictation. Various. This is the beginning of the next chapter 7. The headings were given. Various kinds of governments represent the exercise of different aspects of consciousness. The American experiment with democracy is heroic, bold, and innovative. In historical terms, as you understand them, this is the first time that all of the inhabitants of a country were to be legally considered equal citizens one with the other. That was to be and is the ideal. In practical terms, of course, there often are inequalities. Treatment in the marketplace or in society often shows great divergence from that stated national ideal. Yet the dream is a vital portion of American national life, and even those who are unscrupulous must pay at least lip service or cast their plans in its light. In the past and in large areas of the world now, many important decisions are not made by the individual, but by the state or religion or society. In this country, several issues came to the forefront of American culture. The externalization of organized religion, which became more of a social rather than a spiritual entity, and the joining of science with technology and moneyed interest. Rupert's book on William James would be good background material here, particularly the sections dealing with democracy and spiritualism. In any case, on the one hand, each individual was to be equal with each other person. Marriages, for example, were no longer arranged. A man no longer need follow his father's vocational footsteps. Young adults found themselves faced with a multitudinous number of personal decisions that in other cultures were made more or less automatically. The development of transportation opened up the country, so that an individual was no longer bound to his or her native town or region. All of this meant that man's conscious mind was about to expand its strengths, its abilities, and its reach. The country was, and still is, brimming with idealism. That idealism, however, ran smack into the dark clouds of Freudian and Darwinian thought. How could a country be governed effectively by individuals who were, after all, chemicals run amok in images, with neuroticism built in from childhood? Children of a tainted species thrown adrift by a meaningless cosmos in which no meaning could be found. Organized religion felt threatened, and if it could not prove that man had a soul, it could at least see to it that the needs of the body were taken care of through suitable social work, and so it abandoned many of the principles that might have added to its strength. Instead, it settled for platitudes that equated cleanliness with virtue. Hence, of course, your deodorant advertisements and many other aspects of the marketplace. In the public mind, it made little difference whether the devil or tainted genes condemned the individual to a life in which it seemed he could have little control. He began to feel powerless. He began to feel that social action itself was of little value. For if man's evil were built in, for whatever reason, then where was there any hope? There was some hope, at least, in looking for better living conditions personally. That was some hope in forgetting one's doubts in whatever exterior distractions could be found. Idealism is tough, and it is enduring, and no matter how many times it is seemingly slain, it comes back in a different form. So those who felt that religion had failed them looked anew to science, which promised to provide the closest approximation to heaven on earth. Mass production of goods, 2 cars in every garage, potions for every ailment, solutions for every problem, and it seemed in the beginning that science delivered, for the world was changed from candlelight to electric light to neon in the flicker of an eye, and a man could travel in hours distances that to his father or grandfather took days on end. And while science provided newer and newer comforts and conveniences, few questions were asked. There was, however, no doubt about it. Exterior conditions had improved, yet the individual did not seem any happier. By this time it was apparent that the discoveries of science could also have a darker side. Life's exterior conveniences would hardly matter if science knowledge was used to undermine the very foundations of life itself. The various potions taken faithfully by the public were now often found to have very unfortunate side effects. The chemicals used to protect agriculture had harmful effects upon people. Such situations bothered the individual far more than the threat of nuclear disaster, for they involved his contact with daily life, the products that he bought, the medicines that he took. Some people looked and are looking for some authority, any authority, to make their decisions for them, for the world seems increasingly dangerous, and they, because of their beliefs, feel increasingly powerless. They yearn toward old ways when the decisions of marriage were made for them, when they could safely follow in their father's footsteps, when they were unaware of the lure of different places and forced to remain at home. They have become caught between science and religion. Their idealism finds no particular outlet. Their dreams seem betrayed. Those people look to cults of various kinds, where decisions are made for them, where they are relieved of the burden of an individuality that has been robbed of its sense of power by conflicting beliefs. At one time, the males might have been drafted into the army and, secretly exultant, gone looking for the period before full adulthood, where decisions would be made for them, where they could mark time, and where those who went not fully committed to life could leave it with a sense of honor and dignity. In the past also, in your country, there were convents, and monasteries for those who did not want to live in the world as other people did. They might pursue other goals, but the decisions of where to live, what to do, where to go, how to live, would be made for them. Usually, such people were joined by common interest, a sense of honor, and there was no retaliation to be feared in this century. Cults, however, deal primarily with fear, using it as a stimulus. They further erode the power of the individual so that he is frightened to leave. The group has power. The individual has none, except that the power of the group is vested in its leader. Those who died in Ghani, I can't pronounce that, for example, were suicidally inclined. They had no cause to live for, because their idealism became so separated from any particular actualization that they were left only with its ashes. The leader of Jonestown was at heart an idealist. When does an idealist turn into a fanatic? When can the search for the good have catastrophic results? And how can the idealism of science be equated with the near disaster at 3 Mile Island and with the potential disasters that in your terms exist in the storage of nuclear waste or in the production of nuclear bombs? Take your break. Now, people who live in tornado country carry the reality of a tornado in their minds and hearts as a psychological background. To one extent or another, all of the events of their lives happen punctuated or accented by the possibility of disaster. They feel that any time they might be caused to face the greatest challenge to rely upon their strongest resources, their greatest forbearance, and faced by a test of endurance. They often use such a psychological and physical backdrop to keep those qualities alive within themselves, for they are the kind of people who like to feel pitted against a challenge. Often the existence of probabilities and their acceptance does provide a kind of exterior crisis situation that individually and in mass is a symbol of independence and inner crisis. The crisis is met in the exterior situation, and as the people deal with that situation, they symbolically deal with their own inner crises. In a way, those people trust such exterior confrontations and even count upon a series of them of varying degrees of severity that can be used throughout a lifetime for such purposes. Those who survive feel that they have been given a new lease on life, regardless of their circumstances. They could have been killed and were not. Others use the circumstances as excuses for no longer hanging on to a wish for life, and so it seems that while saving face, they fall prey to the exterior circumstances. I bid you a fond and even a jolly good evening. And Rupert's material on plants may lead him to some most creative extensions of his own consciousness and new insights. Yes, good night. Jane remembered that Seth had mentioned tornadoes, which we hadn't expected him to do. Her delivery in trance has been steady and often quite forceful. Seth's reference to her material on plants concerned some short, humorous essays she had started writing for her own amusement a couple of days ago in response to some new ideas. Her headings for them is tentative: The Plants Book of People, The Plant Symposium, People. I think the pieces are very well done. As she progresses with them, Jane doesn't know whether they'll end up as a book or even whether she'll do anything at all with them. If nothing else, she said now, the ideas could find their way into Seth's material, or else they'd originated in Seth's material, that was innate within her to start with. Notes on session 848. A few miles below Harrisburg, 3 Mile Island, with both of its nuclear reactors offline, is inoperative, sprawls on its island in the Susquehanna River like a wounded behemoth. Engineers are guiding the disabled reactor of Unit 2 toward a cold shutdown. The state in which the temperature of the water in the reactor's primary cooling system drops below the boiling point. Pressure is reduced and the risk of a meltdown of the uranium fuel rods in the reactor core is eliminated. But it will be at least many months before the unit's highly radioactive containment building can be entered for an assessment of damage. In the meantime, Pennsylvania's governor has announced that it's safe for children and pregnant women to return to the area. The severity of the event at 3 Mile Island has spurred anti-nuclear protesters into action in many areas of the country, and the proliferating state, federal, and industry investigations into the accident promise to generate a collective fallout of a kind that's bound to have far more impact on the nuclear power industry and society than anything that comes from the crippled plant itself so far. Jane and I believe that eventually this worst accident yet will be seen as a most fortunate occurrence, emphasizing, indeed, as it already has, the great dangers inherent in the growing worldwide emphasis upon nuclear power at this time. We're following the whole affair involving 3 Mile Island with the greatest interest, and my clippings file on it grows daily. I'll end the session now.